This is FE Peer Review. The date is January the 15th, 2022. Sky-free observation of model boat demonstrates strong mirage effects. That's all, folks. I'd like to thank Funky Catholic 69 for bringing this to my attention and giving me the idea for this video. I have looked at one or two of Sky-free's videos in the past, but it's been a while. Funky Catholic 69. By the way, you've got a great username. So this is the comment. You should examine more of Sky-free's videos. Flirts use her videos as evidence, and they repeat it ad nauseum every time I bring up things behind the curve. The video he linked to was about 2 years old, and I thought since there were some more recent ones, I would do one of those instead. But yes, we'll look at that. And he adds, edit, it is also sad to note that she holds 2 degrees, bachelor's and master's in atmospheric science. Yes, it is sad to note that a person with an education should allow themselves to get sucked into this kind of nonsense is really a pity. It's my understanding that she has come to it through some what I would consider very misguided biblical literalist religious views. Another thing I want to just say about Sky-free's channel is that she focuses pretty much entirely on doing these observations over lakes where she puts small model boats on the water and then films them and gathers up mirage type film effects. She doesn't seem to really advocate a lot about the flat earth. That's not her message. Her focus is on these mirage effects, but she is very much clearly sympathetic to the whole flat earth thing. If you go to her channel and look at some of her videos, you'll see that her comment section is full of congratulatory responses from all of our favorite flat earthers, and she seems to be perfectly fine with that. She seems to be perfectly fine with having these people use her material in their videos. We've got The Plain Truth here. I saw Ryan Q. Vincent up there. So yeah, she seems to be very much comfortable with the whole flat earth camp and the kind of science denial and misinformation that they spread. She also seems to have an underlying motivation in all of her videos to cast doubt on what we see. It seems like the implication in what she's doing with her focus on these mirages is to make us think that perhaps all of these long distance images can't be trusted. And therefore, when we see good, clear video of ships disappearing behind the curvature of the ocean, we should doubt that and think maybe we're just seeing mirage effects. Well, that is not the case. She's wrong about that. We're going to look at that. And by promoting her work this way, she is really undermining proper critical scientific analysis of natural phenomena. So this is, in my book, anti-science, what she's doing. That's the underlying motivation behind what she's doing. It's to deceive. But now we'll continue with this particular video of hers. It's called RC Battleship Sails into the Horizon. One thing she's good about is she's careful to document her observations pretty well. So here we're seeing the location. We've got the lake here and the far bank, and the boat's going to be over there towards the far bank. She shows us the location on a map. Looks to me like Google Maps. And we all know that, of course, Google uses a globe earth database, but that's something that they prefer not to talk about. Camera lens centered approximately 2 inches above the water surface. Now, why so close to the water? You maximize refraction effects when you're that close to the water. Maybe she wants to maximize them. She's also looking at short distances, so she's probably also got in mind that she's imitating a longer distance observation even by going closer to the water's surface. Anyhow, she does document the material. And we've got humidity, 75 degrees. Observation took place between 11:45 and 12:15 p.m. Those are her words, but I have put the text on the screen there. As far as humidity, that's just a weather general humidity reading of the entire area. That's not the specific humidity of her location. And it's important to note that when you're dealing with bodies of water like a lake, you can have an extreme humidity gradient from if you go from inches above the surface to feet above the surface. So that 75% is not really representative of the atmospheres through which we're going to be looking. That's a little bit of work that she could consider reviewing and perhaps improving. Water temperature, 55 degrees. That's great that she measured it. Air temperature near the ground surface, 53 degrees. Air temperature around 5 feet high, approximately 50 degrees. So we see that there isn't a big change in the air temperature immediately above the water. And then this is the object we'll be looking at, her little model boat there. She's put a few dimensions on it for us. It starts out about 300 feet away from us and then moves to 500 feet. At 500 feet, we start to be able to see the far bank well enough to identify that there is a certain amount of mirroring happening. A mirage is beginning to form, and we're seeing some mirroring of the grassy far bank. I have added the green line to indicate approximately where the mirroring line is occurring. Note, however, that there doesn't appear to be any mirroring connected to the battleship yet. Now, the battleship is, I think, less than halfway across the lake at this point. So apparently, the atmospheric effects causing this mirage aren't strong enough yet at the distance of the battleship. Here we are at 700 feet, and the hull is no longer visible. We will note that we are now starting to see some mirroring of the battleship, and it's approximately where the hull would be. However, the mirroring and mirage is concealing that hull. And again, we see the mirror line of the grasses. And note that these two don't line up. That's because we're looking at objects that are at two different distances from us. Here we're approaching 900 feet, and the mirage is becoming much more pronounced on the boat. Still doesn't align with the mirroring of the far bank, but it's approaching it. At 900 feet, we see extreme distortion of the boat. We're only seeing a little bit of the top of the boat at this point, with the mirroring of the mirage concealing everything below it. Also, the water surface is fairly calm, but we're close enough to the water that these ripples are also helping to conceal the hull of the boat. With the camera lens just 2 inches above the water, the farther that boat's going to go away from us, the more those ripples are going to conceal, even if they're not a full 2-inch high. And now we're at 1,000 feet, and this is when it gets interesting. The boat no longer appears to be in the water at all. The far bank grasses are showing between the boat and the water, so it's as if the boat is flying. And we're going to take a little look at the video of that in a moment. Here we see another image taken from the video at about that point. And then finally, all that's left of the boat is this little bit up here that's floating along above the water. So in this case, this boat, despite what you're going to hear her say, this boat is not disappearing bottom up at the horizon or at some apparent horizon or anything like that. This boat is flying up off the water and disappearing into a mirage above the surface. So it is in no way comparable to many of the images we see of boats disappearing behind a horizon. Now let's take a little look at a few spots in her video. First thing I'd like to point out is the boat itself is quite unbalanced and leans heavily to the left. So there are moments when the boat is crossing the screen from left to right and we see the hull very well, and then it immediately turns and goes from right to left and we don't see the hull at all. So that there is kind of an unfortunate aspect to her observation. The boat is not really helping us in giving us consistent imagery to work with. I would advise her to consider a different boat next time, something that sits more balanced in the water. I've turned the sound off on her video because I'm going to be saying a thing or two over it. There is a link to her video in the description, so if you want to see her original video, you're welcome to. So going from right to left, going from left to right, we see the hull quite clearly here. but the boat's immediately going to turn around and go the other way, and now we don't see the hull at all. We can see that it's listing to the left. I'm going to skip to where the mirage effect becomes strongest. At this point, the boat is almost completely concealed. The line of mirroring is approximately where I'm running the mouse, and just a little bit of the mirrored upper parts of the boat are touching the water, appearing to touch the water. All right, at this point, we're going to see that the grasses are mirrored underneath the boat, and the boat is simply flying above the water surface. So I ask you, does that look like a boat disappearing from bottom up at the horizon? I think that's a question worth asking. Okay, I'm going to play the last bit of her video with the sound on so that you can hear what she has to say, some of the conclusions she's drawing and ideas she's leading towards with this observation here. And this is my concern in this video, and this is the point we're going to address.
The geometric horizon for a viewer at 2 inches on a sphere of our given radius would be over 2,600 feet away. So there can be no obstruction due to curvature in a mere 1,000 feet. Yet, the rate that this bottom-up disappearance of the RC boats occurs across these small lakes matches what is witnessed with large boats over large bodies of water.
I addressed that statement in a comment on her video so that she would be aware of my concern, and I'm going to read that comment. I started by quoting her. Quote, yet the rate that this bottom-up disappearance of the RC boats occurs across these small lakes matches what is witnessed with large boats over large bodies of water. I responded, that generalization is absolutely not true, except in circumstances similar to your observation here, circumstances in which there is so much atmospheric disturbance that what we see is mirroring, miraging, and the boat not disappearing bottom first below the horizon, but rather up above the water into the mirrored mirage zone of atmosphere. To draw conclusions that this observation of yours somehow parallels and explains why we see objects of all kinds disappear bottom first at the horizon, even when atmospheric conditions are at their best, with the least amount of distortion, is very, very dubious. As a specific comparison of boats in the horizon, I'd like to bring up this one of dozens of examples. What we see here is a surprisingly clear photo. There is indeed a little bit of distortion happening. We see waviness in these masts here. Yet at the same time, what we don't see is any hint of mirroring or miraging happening at the horizon. And yet a large portion of this boat is obviously concealed by water. So it's no mirage that's hiding the bottom of this boat. These three images, on the other hand, make an interesting comparison as well. The upper two images, where we see what appear to be boats flying through the air, are not, in fact, the same mirage effect that we saw in Sky Free's video, because you will notice there's no mirroring of the boats. These boats are not being mirrored. In fact, as I've heard this explained, these are not even mirages at all. What we're actually witnessing is a kind of a ground mist that can conceal the horizon and cause a part of the water to appear the same color as the sky. So we lose sight of the horizon, but this being a kind of thin mist over the surface of the water, we're not actually seeing a mirage effect at all. We're just losing the gap between the sky and the water line, and then the mist comes to an end. We see the same in the image on the right. The bottom image, however, we do see mirroring of the boat, most definitely, and this very much resembles what Sky Free saw on her lake. So I have no problem with saying, yes, we do indeed see the effect Sky Free recorded, sometimes. At other times, we see effects such as these. I'm going to turn on a couple of little guidelines I drew and zoom in here just to make it easier for everybody to see, get a little close-up view. So we see most definitely the mirroring happening there. However, we can also see that there's a faint, I'm going to turn the line off, and you'll see that there's a very faint indication, especially on the right side, of a horizon in that mist. So these are some different phenomena that we see that bear no resemblance to what Sky Free recorded. So her observation there cannot be generalized across what we see on long distance observations, and that's my key point. Her observation cannot be generalized, and she needs to understand that herself, and she needs to discourage other people from using her work and generalizing from it in an incorrect way. If she doesn't do that, she is party to the misinformation those people are spreading. I'd like to end this video by looking at a few more examples and doing one little bit of analysis of one of the images. This is a snippet of video that many of you have probably already seen. It's from a channel called the MC1, and I'll put a link in the description. It's a bunch of container ships, one of them closer to us and the other far distant. And one of the things that's remarkable in this image is just how clear the horizon is and how clear the distant container ship is. Notice that we're seeing hardly any distortion of any kind on those containers as that ship goes past. There's no miraging happening. There's very little atmospheric refraction distortion happening in that image there. And yet, the one ship is very definitely closer to us and in front of the horizon, and the other is very definitely behind it. So this is an observation that people can make every day around the world, and it is in complete opposition to what Sky Free is showing in her imagery. This is why I say her mistake is to generalize her observation. It's due to a very specific set of conditions, that's all. Here's another example. We've got a video of wind turbines, and there is a very little distortion happening from refraction in this video. There's a very slight amount, but the thing to note here, I've just paused it, is that these turbines have a base and a little platform partway up. And the turbines that are closest to us, you can see that. The turbines that are most distant, you can't see that base. It's disappeared. And if you compare the length of the blades to the height of the towers, you can develop a scale, which you can then apply to the more distant turbines using their blades and their towers. And what you find is that the base of those more distant wind turbines is very far down. I did an analysis of this on one of my videos from 2020, and I'll show that in a moment, a clip of it. But I had also wanted to point out that if you watch the tips of these turbines as they rotate, the tips that go down near the water line, you'll see a very slight distortion happening because there is right at the surface of the water a certain amount of excessive refraction causing some distortion, but it's very minor. So let's just play a little bit of that. I think I'll run it just a little bit slow so that we can see the tips of the blades as they come down towards the water line. Watch the tips and you'll see that they bend just slightly. There, you see a little bit. Anyway, the distortion from refraction effects is pretty minimal in this picture. I did an analysis of this video back in the day when Ranty was still a flat earther. It was called The Mystery of Ranti's Sinking Wind Turbines. And I used one of the turbines. I used the blade to create a scale, and then I applied that scale for the height of the tower. All of that design information for these turbines was readily available online. And I determined that the bottom of this tower, of this turbine, was down here where this red line is. So again, we're not seeing all of this due to some kind of miraging effect, which is just very simply not happening in this image at all. So we looked at the boats and we looked at some wind turbines. I wanted to look at the skyline of Chicago. That's an image that often comes up. Here's one beautiful photo of the skyline of Chicago from across Lake Michigan. And in this image, we do indeed have a fairly narrow but definite band of mirage happening. I drew a little guideline, which I'll turn on. You can see it there in green. That's the line of mirroring that we are seeing in this image. So unquestionably, there's something behind that we're not seeing, whether it's water or the shoreline, who knows? We can't say what's behind that without more information. But we do know that the mirage is indeed concealing some things. But let's move on from that. There's more to look at. Another picture of the Chicago skyline. Here it is again on a much more clear day. And in this case, there is almost no distortion happening at the horizon line at all. There's like 1 pixel. If I zoom in here, you get like 1 pixel of fuzziness happening at the edge of the water. In fact, I will go ahead and zoom in. You can see that there's really none of that stuff that we were seeing in Sky Freeze video happening here. So I thought this might be a good picture to do a little analysis on, since we don't have that kind of messy mirage stuff in the way. Let's see what happens when we try to take this building apart now. The tallest building in the skyline, that's the Willis Tower, formerly called the Sears Tower. And it's a well-known landmark in Chicago. It's the tallest skyscraper in Chicago, one of the tallest in the world when it was built. I think it might have been the tallest at the time it was built. I gathered up a little information about it. The height of the tower is 1,450 feet, not including these masts up here. It has 108 floors. And it's a series of steps. Most of you have probably seen this tower before. It's a series of steps. So the lowest step, which I've got the mouse on right here, is the 50th floor. So from that step to the top of the building, that's the 108th floor. That is 58 floors. I did pixel counting here, and it's 52 pixels in this particular image, which was the best image I could find, the highest resolution I could find. 52 pixels. That gives us 0.897 pixels per floor. And we know the building has 108 floors. So in pixels, the building is 0.897 times 108 floors, which comes to 96.83 pixels. We have the 52 pixels here. Well, another 47 pixels, I rounded up to 97. Another 47 pixels will give us the lower part of the building from the 50th floor to the ground. So I drew in the red lines here to indicate the additional 47 pixels. So that gives you the whole picture there. And what is it that we find? A very significant portion of the skyline of Chicago down at the bottom, hidden by water, and absolutely no evidence of mirages in any way being the cause of this. So I think I've beat this dead horse enough. I think the message should be very, very clear to Sky Free that if you continue to allow people to misuse your work, you are responsible for the damage they do with it. And I think I've demonstrated very well that what you're showing us in your videos is a specific circumstance that arises under specific conditions and cannot be generalized to images such as we're seeing here, cannot be used as a blanket way to debunk the globe or whatever other nonsense like that you want to do with it. So if the reason for all of this on your part is because you're a biblical literalist and you want to think that the 3 or 4 spots there, I think a couple of them in Isaiah, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, are describing a flat earth with a dome over it, it would really be worth your time to talk to some people who hold the same general religious views as you, but who have a more sophisticated understanding of the Old Testament. Because I think that's where your problem probably lies. So I hope you'll take my words. I offer them in respect, but obviously I disapprove of what you're doing. I'm not berating you. I'm not calling you names. I do think you need to revisit what you're doing and question. Okay, that's enough, I think. I think I'll just leave us here enjoying the beautiful skyline of Chicago, an amazing city. If you have never been there, try to go someday. It's one of those places you shouldn't miss. I guess I should say all the usual things about hit that like button and leave a comment. Especially do enjoy reading the comments. That's the funnest part of this whole thing, is watching people's comments and the conversations that get going. So have fun with this. Share your thoughts. If you've got any other sources of good imagery, let me know. Share it with our friends. Have a great day. Bye-bye.